I've gotten a lot of comments on YouTube asking about the recent video that went viral on another user's page that got millions of views that has slight misinformation about the Claudia Sanders Dinner House, Kentucky Fried Chicken suing Uncle Harley and the founder himself, Uncle Harley, the Colonel. So I don't got millions of views. I don't got millions of followers for my stories to stick. The true stories coming straight from the Colonel's family. So I'm going to have to make as many as possible for it to process through the internet until the truth is out there and people can spread it around themselves. So the Claudia Sanders Dinner House was made in the mid to late 1960s by Uncle Harley and Aunt Claudia. It was not made in spite of Kentucky Fried Chicken. He sold in 1964 to Brown and Massey. Brown and Massey had no problems with him having this restaurant and operating it. The reason why he kept the Canadian franchises is similar to how he had this one restaurant. He kept the Canadian franchises because he could still do things on a handshake instead of having to follow all these contracts and legal papers where the American corporate system was just rising. And the business in America and the other franchises around the world were becoming too much for Uncle Harley to handle himself as a business owner, because he was offered a fair price for the business and he said no, he's not going to sell it. Well, after some convincing and Uncle Harley talking to his wife, he decided it was becoming too much for him to handle and he should go ahead and sell it instead of it falling into his estate. So he sold it, kept the Canadian franchises, bought a home in Mississauga, Canada, and would stay there for 4 to 5 months out of the year to maintain those franchises. So you could say he moved there for that long and then moved back. By 1973, he was back in the States primarily, and it was in the Shelbyville mansion, the Black Hall Manor, which was right next door to the Claudia Sanders Dinner House, which was formerly known as the Colonel's Lady at the time. So this ran from the 1960s until 1973. Because in 1973, my grandfather visited Uncle Harley at the Black Hall Manor in Shelbyville, Kentucky, and he brought my father and my uncle to meet Uncle Harley for the first time. The following year, he went to go visit him again, and he wasn't there. My grandfather met the Suttles family indirectly. They didn't know each other, didn't get to know each other. But he went there, and the strangers, who were the Suttles family, opened the door, and he found out that our uncle had moved. So he called up our uncle, found out he moved to L.A. Grange Road, and they went to go visit him there. The last time they visited there was 1979. So the Colonel's Lady was allowed to operate for that long. Huelblind, the new company that Brown and Massey had sold the business to in 1971, did not like that Uncle Harley had a restaurant with the Colonel in the name, because the Colonel was the trademark name that he sold to Kentucky Fried Chicken. So a lot of people, based on that video, are blaming the original investors. And though there are some sour feelings with Brown and Massey, with how they changed quite a few things on Uncle Harley, there's still some respect there to have. They did not sue him. They knew better than to sue him. They allowed him to have that restaurant. The reason why he had that restaurant, again, we're going back to Canada, he was able to do things on the handshake. He was able to run a single mom and pop's restaurant out of one location just fine over an entire franchise of locations. So it was easier for him to maintain that one restaurant in Kentucky in the United States than it was for him to maintain the entire business of Kentucky Fried Chicken, which is why he sold and he opened that restaurant for his wife and for himself to be able to operate and still serve food to the public in his semi-retirement, while also being the spokesperson for another brand that he created. So when Huelblind, and by the way, they were an alcohol company, he did not like alcohol. When Huelblind decided they were going to sue him, they said, you can't use your name in this restaurant, you need to change it. And they filed a lawsuit. He filed a counter lawsuit to see how much of his soul they owned. He filed a counter lawsuit for them misuse of his name and image for products that he didn't approve of. And people will say, well, he sold the restaurant, he didn't have a right to do that. Yes, he did have a right to do that. He criticized heavily the quality when Brown and Massey took over near the end of their reign, because he said things were made cheaper for production, they weren't his quality, and he was going to go on Johnny Carson and tell everybody how bad the food had become under the leadership of Brown and Massey. Well, Massey decided to resign. He had plenty of other restaurants that he had his name in, that he was working with. He had plenty of money. He didn't need it, so he resigned. Governor John Y. Brown Jr. decided to put the Colonel as the lead in the board of directors for food and quality control. And I don't have a script in front of me. I am doing all this from memory. So forgive me if I stutter. So anyways, Uncle Harley had the right to do it because he was on the board of directors for food and quality control. So he filed a lawsuit because the contract that they had, that he did sign when he sold, said they would never change his quality. And with his job position that he had, not only as a spokesperson, but as one of the people on the board of directors for food and quality control, was that they had to go through him to approve of new products that they put his name on. So because they decided, we're going to sue you, he decided, I'm going to sue you too. And it turned out to be bad publicity for the brand. So what they did was settle the lawsuit. Well, in the settlement, Uncle Harley had to agree to sell the restaurant ownership, the property it was on, and change the name of the restaurant. So they settled. They pay him $1 million. He sells it to the Settles family, who used to work for Kentucky Fried Chicken and was a close family friend of his. And then he moved. And the Settles family has the restaurant for sale now today with the property. But it's called the Claudia Sanders Dinner House now because it is no longer the Colonel's Lady after that lawsuit. The other lawsuit they were talking about, they said was within the same year. It was not within the same year. It was later on in the 1970s, and it was a franchisee of Kentucky Fried Chicken in Bowling Green, Kentucky, that didn't like what Uncle Harley was criticizing their quality on their gravy and mashed potatoes. So when they took him to court on that one, the judge threw it out and said that the Colonel would absolutely know what his quality would be and if a restaurant wasn't performing it. So he threw it out because he was allowed to criticize it. And then there's rumors about the Claudia Sanders Dinner House circulating in those comments. This is nothing new. People do this all the time. They think that they served the original Kentucky Fried Chicken recipe. This is inaccurate. During the time that they created the Claudia Sanders Dinner House, he teamed up with Marion K. Spice's Bill Summers to create a recipe called 99X. 99X is not the original recipe. There's a reasoning for this, that I know this, because I talked with Bill Summers' grandson, Cordell Reed, and he confirmed it for me. There's a reason he knows it's not the original recipe that came later in life after his grandfather died, but we're not going to talk about that in this video. What you need to know is that Uncle Harley did not give Cordell's grandfather, Bill Summers, the recipe. He gave him a taste of it and challenged him to recreate the recipe. So what Bill Summers did was recreate a recipe that Uncle Harley deemed good enough to serve out of the Claudia Sanders Dinner House. When Huel started that lawsuit and started making him mad over things, he decided to go behind their back and give it to 200 franchisees of Kentucky Fried Chicken. These franchisees today and other restaurants that have spun off since claim, or their customers claim, that they're the only ones that were entrusted with the original recipe by the Colonel to continue it on. This is inaccurate. They were given 99X. This was also part of a lawsuit in the 1980s between Bill Summers and Kentucky Fried Chicken, which was later dropped because Kentucky Fried Chicken had no ground to sue. Marion K. Spices reserved the right to sell to anybody who wanted to buy. The Kentucky Fried Chicken franchisees that agreed to take and establish a connection with Marion K. Spices were in violation of their contracts. So there was nothing to sue Marion K. over, so they dropped the lawsuit because it wasn't the original recipe. And that's the rest of the story there. So the Claudia Sanders Dinner House serves 99X. It's not the original recipe. It's a variant that's close to it based off the flavor. You could buy that today. I got the link in my bio to go to the website. Everything I talk about, all these companies and brands that are spun off today that have been claimed by customers to be the original recipe, I've spoken with the owners. It's not the original recipe. It can't be the original recipe. And I've confirmed that. But I have them linked in the bio so you could go try them out yourself. I hope this clears up everything. This is a very long video, and I hope it clears up everything.